Hello everyone, welcome to CyberScoop TV. Greg Otto here from the 2020 RSA conference. And I'm talking with Chris Hallenbeck, CISO of the Americas for Tanium. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, a lot of conversations about how to better structure an enterprise for cybersecurity purposes. Talk to me a little bit about the conversations that you're having about the organizational obstacles to making cybersecurity better.
Communication is honestly one of the biggest things, and it's mostly communication between ops and security.
Okay.
They typically break into very strong silos. Security has their function, ops has their function, security finds the vulnerabilities, launches them over the wall to ops and says, here, go fix these things. And then it's a paper exercise, like, spreadsheets and things like that, and pointing fingers of who's not solving the problem, who's not moving the needle,
right,
rather than a more collaborative approach.
Okay.
Because they're usually also using different tools to do that work.
Okay.
And if you have different tools, they sometimes disagree with one another.
Right.
So you spend more time arguing about the validity of the data than you actually do solving the problem or figuring out, hey, what can we do?
Right.
So for us, it's really a big push around get everyone onto a common tool set so that they have a common frame of reference. And then they can work from that to solve problems. We see a lot of organizations will come in on the security side, start working with them on that. And over time, ops will say, hey, where are you getting this data from?
Okay.
And then it turns into, hey, can you run me off a report on this? And then it's, can you give me an account so I can start running my own reports?
Right.
And it ends up being that slow process of just getting people to talk to one another and share data back and forth. And then it becomes more of a collaborative thing over time.
Okay.
There's no one magic bullet. You can have a CISO that reports to the CIO and then up through to the audit committee.
Right.
You can have them as direct peers to one another. There's no one magic bullet. It depends on the organization. You may have a lot of business CISOs in different business units. That all can work, but in organizations that have BISOs and things of that sort, it's a lot of manual reporting, and you almost at the top have to take them at their word of what are they doing. There's no way to do a technical cross-check of are we getting the right information. And they may not be, maliciously sending you wrong data. They just may have a false sense of security in what they're relying on.
Right.
So there's no cross-check.
Speaking of that false sense of security, and a different problem altogether is still finding out the visibility in your networks and what is sitting on your networks.
Yeah.
How are you seeing that progress with your customers?
That's actually a big part of what we're seeing more of. We're seeing a bigger shift back towards the back to basics. A lot of time over the last 15 years has been spent finding that magic bullet, right? Go find that one solution that's just going to stop those bad guys dead, and I don't have to worry about it, even if I don't have things patched.
Right.
That's not reality, and people are finding out after buying the 15th product over those times
that it really didn't matter, right?
Right, it didn't actually solve the problem. What they did is created new problems, new complexity, a lot of shelfware. Like, you bought this thing, but you're not using it. Why aren't you using it? Well, my analysts can only log into so many things in a given day. So people are going back to basics. They're saying, look, if I even get this whiz-bang tool and I put it on my machines, if it's only on 50% of my assets, what's my residual risk? What am I not addressing? What do I not know I even have? So they're going back to, what do I have? Like, what's on my network in the most basic sense? How many assets are there? How many can I manage? How many am I managing? And then what are those things that I can't manage, but I need to know that they exist, and I may need to put other compensating controls in for those things instead. Maybe put them in a walled off area, whatever that might look like. That's huge. And then the next step, after I know what's on my network, what's on the devices that are on my network?
Right. And those devices, how do you declutter your infrastructure, I guess you want to say? When you have all those devices, how are you going through the process of going, those are fine, but these, we can get rid of these, we don't use these anymore?
Right. So that actually came up in an odd way when I was working an incident in government.
Okay.
Actually, it was the Office of Personnel Management breach.
Okay.
We tasked agencies to go find all of their repositories of PII, personally identifiable information. That sounds simple.
Not really.
Yeah.
Nope.
And we actually gave them like 30 days at the time to go do it. There was no way they were going to even be able to answer for that.
Right.
So we said simplify it. Go out and look for any place that you have database software installed and assume that there's a database attached and that there's PII in it. So you got to start somewhere.
Right.
It doesn't have to be super precise. I just need to know what software is there, what's likely there, and I can peel that back and say, okay, I've got this software. How often is it actually being used? If it's not being used often, I can reduce my number of licenses. I may be able to even remove it altogether, because that's one less thing I have to keep up to date. So you start reducing your attack surface over time. You also reclaim money, right? So you have a cost reclamation that comes out of that as well over time.
Right, which I'm sure your superiors are always happy to hear about, that you're saving them money in the long run.
Yeah.
But from your government expertise to what you're doing now in the private sector, we were talking earlier and you said board conversations are starting to become more and more prevalent, and this has got to be a good thing. I can't think of any other way that it would be bad.
Depends on the board, right?
Oh, okay. Right. There you go.
So for most boards, it's genuinely a good thing. It's not coming out of a place of they're playing gotcha. They genuinely want to understand risk that cyber has for an organization. They may not have all of the knowledge and skill set around cyber to understand it in those terms, but as we discussed, businesses do and boards do understand the concept of risk as a whole. If you can put it in those higher level terms for them, they can work with that. You can help them understand where the residual risk is and whether or not they're comfortable accepting that risk, or whether they want to fund addressing that risk with some project. The key, though, then is continuous feedback loop to the board, to the audit committee of the board, whomever it happens to be, and agree on what are the performance metrics, right? So at some point, the board's going to stop just writing a blank check, and they're going to say, hey, for those last things we authorized you to spend money on, have you done anything with it? Have you moved the needle? Has risk been reduced? And how are we measuring that risk reduction? So that's the next part of conversations that are happening is we've given you the money, now show us forward progress on these things. At first it's nerve-wracking, like you're going to a board and maybe even a little frustrating at first, because you go in with the notion that you have to dumb it down for them. It's not dumbing it down. You are simplifying it into business language, but risk translates fairly well in that.
Right. Okay.
Over time, boards are starting to become more aware of cyber. They're never going to be an expert. That's not a realistic thing.
That's not their job.
No. But over time, you can take maybe a little bit of that time when you meet with them quarterly or whatever time frame it is, and do a little more education. Get them so they can ask deeper, more probing questions at times. But that's sufficient, and it's encouraging that we're seeing more and more CIOs and CISOs that we're talking to that are having that conversation with the board, and they're coming to us and saying, hey, what can you do to help us gather the metrics we need to show progress on these things?
Great. Chris, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate your insight. For all of our videos, check out our YouTube page, and for more on RSA and all things cybersecurity, check out cyberscoop.com. I'm Greg Otto. Thanks for watching.